And we're broadcasting now, and we welcome people as they start to join our webinar for Inclusive Online Design. Make sure users don't miss out. So just as people start to join, and we're seeing people join very, very quickly now, as you're joining, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So at the bottom of your screen, if you just select the chat and type in there where you're joining us from, that'd be great. We're broadcasting to you from Geelong, and our clock is chiming 11 o'clock. So wherever you're joining us from, let us know your city, your state, your country if you're from outside Australia. And great to see we've got people from local region, and we've also got some people just a little bit further down the road, which is great. All Victorian so far. Welcome.
Good morning.
We'll do some formal introductions soon. But hello to everybody who's joining us now, and I'm seeing some familiar names and faces, and really great to see you on board. So by the way, if you're wondering about the recording of this video or recording of this webinar, you would have accepted the request at the beginning as you joined today to say that you understand that we're recording. This is a webinar though, so none of the audio or video is transmitting from you, it's coming from us. The only things that will be recorded with your name and identity on them are things that you put in the chat. So welcome. And good to see people here from lots of places. So as you're joining, I've seen quite a few more people join. Just let us know where you're joining us from. We've got Melbourne and Geelong, lots of Geelong, and that's great for Geelong Design Week. And quite a few more people joining us. If you're having any problem with the sound, do let us know in the chat, or if that's not working for you, you can send us an email using the contact details from when you signed up. And you might notice at the bottom of the screen, you have three icons. The first one is chat, and great to see people are using the chat and letting us know where they're from, where they're joining us from. And you'll also notice there are two other icons. One of them is raise hand, and we'll use that in a minute. You can select that to raise your hand and select it again to lower it. And the third thing that you'll see at the bottom of your screen is a closed caption icon, the little CC. And what we're about to do now is to make sure that that's active for you. So you should be able to choose on your screen either show subtitle, which will allow captions to appear at the bottom of the screen, or you can use show full transcript. And if you choose that, a transcript of what we're saying will appear on the right side of your screen. Hello to Canada. Oh, that's fantastic to see people from all over the place. Oops, and I'm flicking stuff as well. So yeah, with those captions, do use those if you enjoy using those. If you find them distracting, you can hide them. You can show and hide them at any time throughout the webinar. So welcome to everybody. I think we can probably start.
Yeah,
do you reckon, Tim?
I think we should.
I think we should. So the best way to start is with an acknowledgement of country. And I'd like to say that we respectfully acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, which is the land that we're broadcasting to you from here in Geelong, the land and the waters of that region. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today, whether that be live or for the recording of this webinar. We'd also like to mention that we are, and I'll get to that first slide, we're part of Geelong Design Week 2021, and we're very proud to be part of Geelong Design Week, which is an initiative of the Geelong UNESCO City of Design and the City of Greater Geelong. So welcome to you all. We are going to just remind you about the sound and vision. We're only broadcasting our sound and vision, so nothing will invade your privacy, but if you do choose to put something in the chat, we encourage you to. Just understand that that will be recorded as part of the webinar. If you want to communicate with us, that's one of the ways, or you can use the polls we're going to bring up a poll shortly. When you participate in the poll, that is anonymous. And if you choose to email us post-event, we welcome any emails to us as well. So we're sitting here, we've got our names under the screen, but it's probably pretty handy if we introduce ourselves right now. So my name's Lyndal Box. I'm the Director of LB Learning Solutions, which is a boutique learning design business based here in Geelong. And in particular, the reason why I'm so keen to be presenting this webinar in conjunction with Tim and Di is because I have a particular interest and focus on inclusion and accessibility. And this is something that all three of us are passionate about. We share that passion. And so I might ask Tim to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, it's Tim Lucas, and I work in software training as well as e-learning development, especially looking at the same scenario, looking at document management, making sure documents actually are accessible for all users, especially those with screen readers and other screen reading and document reading technologies that are around.
Thanks, Tim. And you're probably seeing a third picture there and wondering where on earth this third person is. And we are so sad to say today that Dr Dianne Ashworth had an unavoidable appointment that she had to attend. So what we've done, because she's very much part of this presentation, is we've recorded some segments that are relevant to demonstrate to you what online design can do for somebody who uses screen reader technology. And you'll see her face a little bit later on. But what we want to do right now is get a bit of a capture about you. So we've learned a little bit about us. Time to learn about you. We want to know about your experiences. And so we've learned a little bit about where you're from, but in particular, what we're keen to find out now is what experience you've had with the online world, whether you design, you publish, or you post content for any sources. We're keen to learn about that. So you've got options up on the screen at the moment, and any of those options or many of those options might be true for you. Choose the ones that are true for you, as many or as few as you like, and we'll get a bit of a capture about how relevant the information is that we're going to present to you. And we may tailor it as well, based on what we get feedback from the poll. Now, as you're putting that polling information in, please remember to use the chat. Tim will monitor the chat, and if any questions come through at any time, we might answer them straight away or pause at an appropriate time to answer. Or if there's no time to answer the question during the session, we'll wait and do it at the end or follow up afterwards if we have too many questions. So we're seeing lots of responses come through. I reckon we can probably...
Yeah, I think it's enough.
I think that's enough. Let's have a look at what those results are and see what we ended up with. And it's really interesting because hopefully you're seeing this now, but what we're seeing is that a lot of you are right across the board using a lot of different platforms to publish stuff, and you're using online sources all over the place.
Yeah, there's quite an array, and yeah, especially their documents sent via email, which, as we'd expect, is the most common way of transferring documentation. So yeah, it's good to see.
And what it tells us is that this webinar is relevant for you, because we're online more than ever now. And even if you weren't 12 months ago, some of us were forced to go online and very quickly, and to pivot and learn what to do pretty fast. So just a little bit of a, bit of info for you. While we're encouraging you to use the chat, and if you've got any questions now, we'd be really happy to start answering them. But I've just wanted to share some statistics with you, and these have come from the Australian Human Rights Commission, about some statistics relating to disability and particularly the online world. And you'll notice here that there are a lot of people who are living with vision impairment and hearing disabilities. And there's a little bit of information here about how many cases have been brought forward to the Australian Human Rights Commission in the last couple of years for people who have been discriminated against for their disability. And we want to start with thinking about that with this webinar, because it's about making an experience great for all of our users. And if we're in the online world and we're not making an experience great for everybody, potentially we can be causing an issue of exclusion and breaking the law. So that's a bit heavy to start with, but I just wanted to throw that in there because people sometimes forget that. So here's an overview of the topics that we're planning on covering. We're going to look at unpredictability, good and bad design. We're going to look at online phase, and this is where we're going to show you some videos of Di navigating some different documents and websites and financial things, just so you can get an idea of what the experience is like for someone who uses assistive technology. Then we're going to look at what we can do to improve user experience. And here's some hot tips for you. And at the end, we'll answer any questions that you might have. So when it comes to the theme for this year's Geelong Design Week, the theme is unpredictable. And when we saw that theme, we went, oh my goodness, this is our world, because
very much.
We know that a lot of people don't expect or don't predict what's going to happen when they put stuff out there. And particularly with an email, you know, we're sending an email, we send it to a whole lot of people, but if we're sending it to somebody who uses assistive technology and they can't, for whatever reason, open it or navigate it, the unpredictable outcome of that is that they can't engage with it, they can't use it. So we're going to look at this from the perspective of good and bad design and unknowingly preventing access and how we can avoid it. But what I want you to do right now is engage with us a little bit. So you've got your raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to put up a series of slides now and ask you to raise your hand if you've experienced these things. So here's something just to put it out there for our first demonstration, is that some people can't navigate successfully on a website. And when that happens, they'll just disregard it. So has this happened to you? Raise your hand if that has, and I'm seeing a couple of people raising their hands. In fact, we're seeing quite a few, and that's interesting.
It is. It's more than I probably would have thought, actually.
Yeah, it's about a third of the people who are viewing today. So that's interesting. Let's move on to the next one. So here's one, and you need to put your hand down, by the way, if you have to select it again to put it down. But here's another one, and this is about assistive technology. So have you ever experienced, whether as a user or somebody who's put something out there, that the software that you're using doesn't support assistive technology? So raise your hand if that's happened to you. Yeah, quite a few. Really, really quite interesting. I know that's happened to me. I should raise my hand as well. All right, let's try another one. So this is, I'm particularly fascinated by this. There's a gentleman by the name of Neil Van Hocht from the Social Media College in Sydney, who about a year ago at a seminar was talking about some statistics that he gathered and the way people interact with social media. And this stat, about 85% of people watching videos with the sound off, is one that he discovered is how people view Facebook. So if you're putting videos on Facebook and those videos aren't captioned, people are missing your content, and that's a majority of people. And interestingly, that was Facebook only, but he said generally in social media, if you're posting videos that don't have captions, 76% of people are watching those with the sound switched off. So put your hand up here if you've ever experienced an issue with videos and no captions and that being a problem for you. Yeah, quite a few. And I'll put my hand up for that one.
And the same for himself. Yeah, that's definitely some things I've seen as well.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We've got another one, and this is reading. And I've deliberately put in something that's difficult to read here. So if you're looking at it and thinking, my goodness, this is not very inclusive, it's not. This is a yellow text on an orange background. And when things are not easily distinguishable, when the colour contrast is not good, it can make people disregard the information because they find it too difficult to read. It can also be the case that people can be colourblind or have low vision, and anything like this makes the world a lot more difficult to engage with. So raise your hand if you've experienced this. And again, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, and the same here. I've seen it many times.
Yeah. And not only in the online world, even just in signs outside businesses, logos, things like that, where the text on the background is very difficult to read. And we're seeing half of people here today say the same thing. Interesting. All right, this one I'm also fascinated by. This is about payments. And when it comes to the Australian Human Rights Commission and those complaints that we were talking about that have happened in the last couple of years, the majority of those complaints about online payments. So when someone can't make an online payment, and sometimes it's because of poor design, they can't purchase products, which is it's actually not doing that business that well. So put your hand up if you've ever been in a situation online where you haven't been able to make a payment. Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah.
All right, we might keep moving. And last one here for a hands up, and this is about visual appeal. And when it comes to design, it can be really subjective. So, you know, when we're choosing the colours that we use, or the text size, or the text style, or anything, we need to make sure that it's appealing, but we need to also remember that that visual appeal is not purely subjective, that it actually works for everybody and that people can read the information. So have you ever seen a document or something that's just like, it might be visually appealing, but it's actually not working for one reason or another? I've got a few there too. Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah, I recently had an example. Someone sent a business card for me to review, and they used a very flowery sort of font, and it was very difficult to read. And then if that then got translated to a business card size, it would have been almost impossible to read, and it would have been shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, yeah. There are different things to think about here, and let's move in now, because I want to just give you a tool, because I know if you're already here in this webinar and you're thinking about inclusion in online design, then you're already taking that step on the journey to make a difference. But I find that, you know, in the last little while, I've been having conversations with clients or people I meet in the community about digital accessibility, online accessibility, and I'm hearing lots of things that I think sometimes disappoint me in the response to people's attitudes about it. And I wanted to bring this image up because I think a tool in my toolkit about this is this particular issue, and I want to share it with you. And what you're seeing right now is not an issue at all. It's the Geelong Regional Library entrance. And this is an architect award-winning building. It's beautiful, it's well used, lots of people use it. And the thing that I'm particularly focused on here is the accessible entrance to the building. And if you cast your minds back, if you're old enough, you might remember that in the late 1970s, entrances to buildings, a lot of the public buildings that we have in our community didn't have accessible entrances. And the building standards changed around at that time. And since then, they've evolved and changed a lot. And any new buildings that are built now, we take for granted, public buildings, we take it for granted that they have an accessible entrance. But I want to cast your mind back, if you remember, to the time when this was first being put forward and what the public response was at the time and the community response. And although we knew it would have been discrimination for people who couldn't get into the building not to have an accessible entrance, we heard all sorts of things coming back from the community saying, but if we do make accessible building entrances, particularly to these old and heritage buildings and everything, it's going to cost too much. You know, it's no one here needs it. Like no one here's using the building who has a wheelchair, so they don't need it. Or it takes too much time. Or it's only for a small percentage of people, so the majority of people can use it, so we're fine. So yeah, remember all of that.
Yes.
But what we can now look back with hindsight and say, and I like to reflect on this with digital accessibility, because I think we're at the stage in the journey with digital accessibility where all those arguments are being put forward still. I think if you have a look at these are images of the people who benefited from the introduction of accessible entrances to buildings. And there's many more people that benefit other than these people. You know, we've got people here who require walking sticks or walkers to get in. We've got people with injuries. We've got parents with children with strollers, delivery people delivering heavy goods with trolleys, and people with wheelchairs. But also, we haven't captured here just the people who prefer to walk through an accessible entrance. They don't want to climb the stairs. And overall, we've seen a greater use of public access buildings because of this. So I think if we remember that when it comes to digital accessibility, we're in a good place. And what I'd like to do now is just open your minds to who it is that would benefit from better digital accessibility. And if you feel like sharing in the chat, we'd love to see. Thanks, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, it's preaching to the choir, I know. So who is benefiting from good digital accessibility? Everyone. Oh, I tend to agree. I'm going to share a couple of things just that I thought of as we were putting this webinar together. But, you know, getting back to that whole thing about videos, a whole lot of people who watch videos with the sound off. Then there's people with their hands full. So I don't know if you do this, but when I'm cooking, I use Siri or Alexa and shout out and say, hey Siri, can you set the timer for 4.5 minutes or whatever it might be with my dirty hands? I don't have to wash them and press an alarm or a timer or anything, and I can stop the timer at the end. It's a great use of technology that was set up for people who couldn't activate a keyboard or couldn't see it, but something that we can all use. People with tired eyes, if we've got good size font and good colour contrast, we're catering to them.
Your timer is set for 4 minutes.
Siri is working, I can see. People with who can't use a mouse. So, if you break your wrist and you're not able to use a mouse, if things have been set up so that the mouse is the only way of navigating, then we're in trouble. And then the last thing here I've got is people who forgot their glasses, and about half of the community wear glasses. And while they're not people who have declared disabilities, all of them, they're certainly people who benefit from good use of accessibility. So enough of me preaching on. What I'm going to do now is have a bit of a demonstration of some actual online failures and some things that happen for people who use assistive technology. So while we said with the entrance to the building that, we thought that was all about, some people in the community thought it was all about people in wheelchairs only. And we said, well, why would we do it just for a small percentage? Well, we would do that because it's exclusion if someone can't access a public building and they're a member of the public. And the same with our online world. If we're not making our online world accessible for everyone, including those who use assistive technology, we're excluding them. So first of all, I've got an example of a document, and this is a document we've put together specifically for the purpose of this webinar. It's got some pictures in it and it's got some headings. And what we've done is we've set up two versions of it. One of them is a version that has been put together. It looks exactly the same as the other, but it hasn't been put together with good structure. And the second document has been done in an accessible way. So Tim, we might have a look at the first one.
We've got what it's telling me there is there's a description of a picture, and it's telling me it's a dog wearing a costume. I don't know if it's a dog wearing a costume, so that's something that that is poorly designed. At the beginning of the document, we've just got a rectangle, so there's no heading. I don't know what the heading of the document is, and there's no headings, it's saying, so I just have to arrow down, and I'll go to the next one. It's there's about us. I can go, yep, that's enough.
So just while we get our video stopped there, there's a couple of things to let you know about here. One of them is that Dr Dianne Ashworth uses JAWS, and JAWS is an assistive technology, the short acronym for Job Access with Speech. And if you were trying to understand what JAWS was saying then and you were finding it difficult, you wouldn't be alone, because if you're a regular user of assistive technology, you can use it at quite a fast speed and get used to it, just like learning a language. And Di has her regular speed at about 76%, 80, somewhere around that. When I do testing, and I'm not a proficient user, I've got a bit used to it and I can work at around 50, but anyone who's inexperienced will probably have it around 30% or less. So if you just went, oh my goodness, what was that? You're not alone. But that is the speed that Di listens to it, and she explains what's going on as she's navigating. If you've got any questions, feel free.
I guess the thing about that is that for the experienced JAWS users, they are very proficient at using appropriately designed documents. It's one of my first experiences with people using JAWS was just how fast someone could actually navigate a document, probably faster than a normal sighted person would.
Yeah.
By several factors, I'd suggest.
Yeah, and Di can proudly read a book much faster than most of us because she just listens at a greater speed.
Yeah.
So what we'll do now is we'll play a video of Di navigating the exact same looking document, but a good version.
This is an example of a good Word document. To start, I can read that there's a heading up the top. So I know it's LB Learning Solutions. We've got the graphics that are announced, and I'll go down. Okay, so I know that there is the logo of LB Learning Solutions and a couple of other little things in there. So it gives me a better description of what's on the page. I can also bring up the headings, and I know there's 4 headings there which I can navigate my way down to.
Just while we close off that video. So I was looking particularly in this document at the heading and the text that was sitting behind the images. And when we describe the images properly in alt text, it really helps to provide context. If we do text behind images that's auto-generated, it often doesn't say what it's meant to. And in that first example, it said a dog wearing a costume, and that's because it was an auto-generated description. It's not a dog wearing a costume.
And it's probably worth even noting that only, if that's a Word document, only modern versions of Word actually did that. Even older versions of Word did nothing with that at all, and they would just been completely blank. Yeah.
So if there was an image there, someone with a screen reader would hear something like image and the size of the image, and they'd know that they were missing out on a description for an image that other people could see. So what we're going to do now is move into websites, and we'll give you a little bit of a demonstration of a couple of different websites that Di is navigating, so that you can see what happens when somebody with assistive technology navigates a page. So all we're looking at here is a home page of a couple of websites, and Di will explain what's happening for her as we go through each one.
I'm in a web page now, and normally when I'm searching the web, I don't know what's on the page, I can't see what's on the page, so I'll arrow down. I might bring up a list of links, which I'll do like this. So I know, I get an idea of what the links are. If I want to search on this page, the shortcut key is to press the letter E. And so we've got the search bar there, and I can press that and yeah, type what it is I want to search, and then submit my search.
So that was a WebAIM website, which is an accessibility based organisation. They're pretty proficient at sorry, we're having problems with our mouth here. Yeah. They're pretty proficient at being able to design things well for people with assistive technology, and they get people to test their website regularly, and they work with people with disability as they go. We're going to now show you, and this is for purposes of education, we're going to now show you a website that doesn't navigate as easily for somebody with assistive technology. And so for the purpose of helping us to understand how we can do things better for people with disability, this is a really good way of seeing what happens when it doesn't navigate as easily.
This is a website. Again, I haven't been in this website before, so I'm scrolling down to see what the links are. It makes no sense to me. It's not been labelled properly. It just says it's a splash bar. And then we've got number slide / button. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm not sure what's here. Search, press my letter E, and it's not bringing up a search. Equals edit, not sure what that is. Okay, so we're going to all the edit boxes and there's no search there. So I would have to explore this further, bring the links up. Maybe there's a search link. Okay, so I've gone down to the letter S in all of those links, and I have found a search bar. So I'll go into that. Still not very intuitive. allow me to search in the net box. So
So that was an example of a website that has been put together in a professional way. It looks fantastic, but as so many of us, you know, we'll put together a website. We might use tools, we might use software, we might use the help of an external designer. We really need to make sure that, as well as it looking good, it actually is a great user experience for everyone. And user experience is about testing also for people who use assistive technology. So let's move on to the next slide. And on this one, this is the hot topic, because when it comes to online payments, there's quite a few things that can cause issues for a lot of people. And one of those things is tax invoices. And before we have a look at the next video, I just want to call out and say thank you to Duncan Warnock for Warnock Accounting, who put together this mock invoice so that we would be able to demonstrate how an invoice that is using a generated software can actually be a problem for people. Let's have a look at that.
invoices. I get sent invoices like everyone else to pay their bills, and I'll go through and read out what I'm hearing here on this invoice. So too graphic means nothing to me. I know there's a picture, but it's not reading out what's there. Okay, invoice 1 Jan. So that is not lining up either. Tax invoice, and that is not what the number is. Invoice number Melbourne 3000. So that is definitely not what it's supposed to be reading. We do know it's from Delicious. What is that? Not sure what that is. And reference widget review. And then we go into the table down there. But invoices can be problematic.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when we see an invoice like that, it's probably a fairly standard thing that we see. We probably take it for granted that that's just the way things are. But the interesting out of order sequence that was happening there is because the reading order is not being set for assistive technology. So it seems a bit random, and in some cases it doesn't make any sense. But when it comes to online payments, that's potentially not the worst. And the worst issue that can happen is when somebody's trying to make a payment and they can't actually finalise the purchase. And one of the most common issues that people experience with that is with CAPTCHA. And we'll explain that now.
Okay, websites that have got, you know, checks to see that I'm not a robot. Give me lots and lots of problems. So we go down. I need to identify that I am a human being. Not sure what that is. Okay, so I've got to check that I'm not a robot. Okay, so we need an audio challenge because I can't see it from the screen. Okay, so what is it doing? I'm checking. This is just an example of some of the issues that I go through. It's sort of like they're making it hard for robots to get in, but they're also making it hard for humans.
So it's interesting on that on that particular version or that example of CAPTCHA. What we could see was the pop-up, but what the assistive technology was doing is reverting back to that original box to check that she was a human. So there was absolutely no way of her navigating to even hear the audio that was available, but it actually, yeah, it just wasn't allowing her to get in there. So when that happens, someone can't finalise a payment. And sometimes it's about subscribing to something when CAPTCHA's used, sometimes it's about finalising a payment, but usually it's trying to capture where somebody is using some sort of automated bot to do something. But yeah, as Di so eloquently put it, they're stopping some humans at the same time when they stop bots.
And I guess if you imagine the frustration where you'll get when you start looking at some of those CAPTCHAs, where you start thinking, now what letter is that anyway? Is it that a C or a G, and the font that they use is really hard to read for a sighted person? Imagine the person who can't see it at all and they don't have an alternative.
Yeah. So we're learning a lot about capture now, and particularly ways of still being able to prevent bots, but without using capture, there are ways to do that. I'm not going to go into that now because we could spend ages on that, but what we will do is move on to the next example. We've got another example of Di showing us about e-learning, and I know there's a few people from the learning and development world who've joined us today, and welcome. When it comes to e-learning, there are a lot of things that we can do better when it comes to user experience, and in particular when we're asking questions. So the design of those questions, and we haven't mentioned language yet, but language can be exclusionary in many cases for a lot of things online. But what we're looking at the moment is just questions, 2 questions. In fact, it's 1 question that's been asked in 2 different ways. So we'll show you the first one.
I'm navigating an e-learning website for some training, and this website has been specifically set up to demonstrate the inaccessibility of dragging to answer the questions. And it's because I use a keyboard that, you know, so it doesn't matter if you're using yours or not, anyone who uses a keyboard won't be able to drag to get their answers aligned with the correct questions. So I'll arrow down. Okay, so there's our first question about, you know, what form of transport is on the rail. I'm reading just some numbers here. I don't know what's on the screen. And I know that's a picture. And that's another picture. And a rectangle. And we go through the page, and yeah, look, it really is. Oh, we've got to drag my answer here, and I'm not sure what answer it is that I need to put there, and can't make any sense of what the page is saying.
So for those of you who use the online authoring tools, or available authoring tools that are out for e-learning, you might be used to, you know, just using the functions as they appear in the authoring tool, and they're easy to use. You can put things together pretty quickly, and it will do it all automatically for you. But if you do it without any consideration for focus order, for describing images, and also for people who don't use a mouse, then all sorts of issues like the one we just saw can occur. But here's the same question now being answered using a different system.
I'm now on a page with a multiple choice, which will allow me then to answer what I couldn't do in the drag option. So I'll arrow down. So it says it's a multiple choice question. Okay, so which form of transport operates on a rail network? And we'll go down, we've got checkboxes. Train, checked. Now I can submit it. And I've got a thumbs up from Neil. Very good.
So it's an amazing different experience that Di had with that second one, and it's a multiple choice question, the same question but asked with multiple choice. And it was accessible because the order of everything occurred in a tangible way. She was able to navigate it using the keyboard functions, didn't need a mouse to do it. Something interesting about drag and drop is that drag and drop can actually be made to be able to be used with keyboard functions only, and it can be set up to be made accessible, but it's not straightforward. So unless you've got experience with triggers and the background in an e-learning authoring tool, it's something that's better to be avoided. Did you want to add anything to that?
I get to say that, yeah, and it's really tool independent. There's no one tool which is better than the other in this scenario, but yeah, drag and drop is just one of those numbers of interaction styles which are difficult to manage.
I haven't seen any questions at the moment. I hope everyone hasn't gone to sleep. Hopefully that was interesting to see Di demonstrating those things. And if you've got any questions about you know, any of those things, please do put them in the chat. I think we've got a couple of questions there. Tim, did you want to have a look then?
Tim Harris is asking a question here about having we set up popular keyboards. It's a challenge providing the clear instruction of what to use. Yeah, I can give you a bit of practical example about that. We had a client recently who wanted to use keyboard shortcuts. They wanted to use an arrow key to move backwards and forwards through an e-learning tool. Now, a JAWS reader uses the arrow key in a very different way, and that would have actually been going backwards and forwards through letter in each word, and would not have worked. And so therefore what they thought was good design actually is quite a problematic design, and they had to go back and rethink that quite substantially.
And as long as you're aware of those things, as long as you do good user testing, you find those things out early and don't come a cropper after it's too late. But once you work for a little while with people who use assistive technology and you learn about those tools, it can be a really easy and quick way to make some great accessible.
Sarah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, drag and drop is one of those things which people sometimes take for granted as a good way of getting interaction with a question, but in actual fact, yeah, it has lots of implications that we don't think about often. And Duncan's asking about the accessibility of most government websites.
That's a really good question, isn't it? Because according to law in Australia, there are digital service standards that all government agencies have to comply with. And when we look at the international standards, and we'll mention those in a minute, they're asking for the web content accessibility guidelines to be at a level AA. And as to whether all government websites are meeting that standard is another question altogether. Essentially, if they're not compliant, they're opening themselves up for liability. But where we were saying before about where people are at, a lot of people aren't aware about how to make things accessible, or they're not spending the time to learn. But those digital service standards that are available online actually are a really good standard that everyone can go by. So yeah, great question. And about JAWS being the only assistive technology around, it's not. But for people who've been around for a while, it was really the only one that people used if they were working. And the reason that it's been so widely used is because the people who developed JAWS have spent many, many hundreds and thousands of hours adapting the tool for all of the different functions that it can do. So it's very capable. But having said that, we're really excited because the tool that's rivaling it now, and is probably, in terms of people who use assistive screen reader technology, it's probably equal in use now to JAWS, is NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Assistant. And that tool was developed by 2 Australians. It's free, and a lot of people are picking up and starting to use it. So it just depends on your preference, and some people prefer one over the other, but those tools are really the only ones that have the level of capability that is suitable for somebody who's going to use the technology all the time. For us, for you and I who can already see, and we'd like to dabble in that type of stuff, there's reader tools, but they're not tools that you would use if you were going to use them every day.
Yeah.
So I might keep moving, keep the questions coming, but I'm going to keep moving on because we now want to look at what we can do to improve user experience. And I know that all of you want to do that. Very excited. Just in terms of Rachel's question, where can we find templates for documents, invoices, things that have accessible design? We've got some great links coming up at the end of this PowerPoint that will send you in that right direction. Some great tips to share. So they're coming up, Rachel. So what can we do for user experience? This is where we like to start. So when it comes to, before we do anything, we want to think about the platform and the devices that people are using. And if we're designing something in particular for public use, it might be that people are going to engage with this using a kiosk or a tablet. Or their mobile phone. And we can't take for granted if we're sitting there designing it on a desktop that everyone else is going to be using a desktop computer. So we need to think about that, and we need to think about those platforms. And we also need to think about, if I'm a Windows user, are we only ever going to have Windows users accessing this? Because the way I set things up and work well for a Windows user, or perhaps somebody who's using a Chrome browser, might not work for an Apple user who's not accessing the same browser.
And especially if you think about a workplace point of view, for we might have some documents which are related to, say, the commencement of employment. And before you come there, we may give you some links to look at, and we don't know what device you might be using, and we suggest you use a keyboard shortcut to navigate through. But Mac versus PC versus some other environment may be quite different. So it's one of those things you have to be very careful about.
Yeah. So once we've done that and we've considered the device and the platform, we want to think about who the user audience are. And I've heard this a lot in organisations because I work in learning and development. It's like, well, we only need to worry about the users who we've got in our organisation because it's for internal staff. And I'll say, that's great. So what do you do? Because you've got induction materials and compliance materials. What do you do if somebody who needs assistive technology signs up and they're going to start tomorrow? Because they could. And if they do, and your induction materials aren't accessible, it's not a really great introduction to the workplace. So think about who your user audience is or potentially could be. And if you're designing things that are going to go out on the web, then you're designing for everybody. And this is something interesting. We all want to look at how we test our design. So we've mentioned already that it's so important to make sure that we test with real users. And when we say that, it's not just Tim and I testing stuff for each other, because we think alike or similarly, we'll have similar preferences. We might have the same interest in colours, but we're not actually the wider audience, the consumers who are going to be using it. So we want to make sure that all of the types of users that we've got, a broad range of users are testing things. We want to test across a variety of devices, as we've already mentioned, because we often find this, and particularly lately, I've been finding this with PDF. A PDF document might work really well on one device and one browser, but it won't even open on another one. So be really careful about what you choose to use and know the intent of the end user.
And I'll give you a practical example. In my office, I run with a Windows Surface Pro as my primary laptop, but then I've also got an Android phone, and I've also got a Mac laptop as well. So none of those three talk to each other, which makes my life confusing sometimes. But if I'm testing, I can test on those three platforms. And there's also an iPhone in the house as well. So it means that I actually have 4 different platforms that I can test content on. And I know that things don't always work properly between all 4 of them.
Yeah. And that's the place that we start at with testing using our own tools. But there are other ways that you can test, and one of those is to test your documents, your online stuff against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And I put this up here now with this statistic because some people say to me, oh, we've got this tool and it will check accessibility for us, so we don't need to get anyone to test it. But interestingly, there's a group that I've quoted here, the Paciello group, who are specialists in assistive technology. They're an international organisation, and they've got a tool that they offer, and you can pay for that tool to be loaded to your website or for your documents or anything like that. But what they'll openly say is that out of the 78 criteria that exist in terms of what we need to do to make everything accessible, only 26 of them are really successfully tested using the automated tool. And that tells us that we just really have to make sure that we're testing with real human beings when we're doing our testing. So I've mentioned these Web Content Accessibility Guidelines a few times, and if I'm speaking another language, I've provided a link to those guidelines for you here. Essentially, the guidelines can be summarised in these 4 words that are here, that things are perceivable, they're operable, they're understandable, and they're robust. And if you go into the guidelines and you're overwhelmed by the information that's there, don't be overwhelmed. There are people who can help you with it. There are tools and checklists that you can get, but you can also rely on the fact that if you're getting good user testing, that you're going to make sure that things are going to be accessible. We mentioned before about government websites, and there's 3 levels that exist within the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, 3 standards. Duncan's question was, what are government websites? Are they accessible? And according to our standards in Australia, we should be meeting level AA. Level AAA is considered the gold standard. Level A is entry level standard. So if we're not meeting level A, we're not providing accessible websites. But for Australian government websites, we should be meeting level AA. So if you've got your website and you're thinking, my goodness, what can I do to make it accessible? Here's some things that we recommend. Use evaluation tools. They're good. They don't do everything, but they're a great way of starting, and they can pick up issues early. And once you've done that, then we recommend using your human testing. Don't assume that because you've done testing today, that in 6 months' time, your website's still going to be accessible. Because if you're posting things all the time, as many of us are, every time you add something, you need to be thinking about, is this actually accessible too? So a lot of accessibility organisations will offer site monitoring over time, and sometimes that's a combination of using automated testing and human testing. We also recommend that you get training and support for your developers, because if they're constantly going to be putting things up and they're not quite sure about it's being accessible or not, it's going to cost you in the end. So it's great to get your team upskilled. And if you don't have a team, if it's just you, we recommend that if you're using a third-party developer, that you make sure that they're a developer with experience in accessibility, and that that's documented as part of a contract arrangement with them.
I guess that last point's definitely worth stressing, because what could happen fairly quickly is that if they have to be retrofitted, it's a lot more work than done up front, and obviously that comes at a cost, which comes back to earlier conversations about it costs too much.
Yeah. Files and documents. This is our particular favourite. With files and documents, as we saw with that example we showed you earlier with Word, there were some extreme differences between something being set up well and something that hasn't been set up well. Within Word, and in fact within all of the Office suite and within Adobe, there are accessibility checkers built into the software, and you can use those as a starting point to check to see if your document's accessible. They will only pick up so much, but they'll do a lot for you, and then you can always get a human being to test them once you've run it through the checker and everything's working well. The same thing applies with documents, because documents end up being public. So if you're sending emails with documents, remember again that your audience may need to be able to read that using assistive technology, or they might have poor eyesight, or they might need some other form of assistance to read your document. So make sure your designers are designing well. And again, if you're using a third-party provider, make sure that they've got accessibility experience. Online meetings. This is a good one, because as we pivoted to doing things online last year in particular, for those of us who weren't all doing it online, we sort of all were very quickly. And in a lot of organisations, people moved to online meetings using online meeting platforms that weren't necessarily easy for everyone to operate. And I'll speak about Microsoft Teams for a minute here. Microsoft Teams is powerful. It's a really good tool, and it has a lot of great functions. But what we've learned is that all of those functions are so available when you try to use assistive technology and negotiate it, it can take a really long time to learn. So assuming that somebody, just because they've got Teams as part of their Office suite, is able to just use it straight away is an assumption we need to be careful of, because unless someone spent the time, and it takes a long time to learn how to navigate that, they could be really put on the back foot when it comes to meetings. So when it comes to which online platform you're going to choose, I'm not saying Teams is a bad one, it's a good one, but make sure that you know about it, that your users are proficient with it, that you test it, that you check their accessibility statements too, because some of the online platforms aren't that great. And if you want some great tips about how to do meetings well, I've got a link to something at the end of this webinar that will show you, and it's a guidance being put out by the Disability Advocacy Resource Unit. And any other resources or anything that you're going to add to an online meeting, make sure that that's accessible. So if you're using Whiteboard, or if you're going to show a document that you have, on the screen that you haven't circulated to everybody before, make sure that you describe it so that everybody is getting the benefit of it. And here's a good one, social media. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I'll give you we all know, whatever platform we're talking about, a plethora of them around. If you start thinking about an image in a social media post. Most people don't, you can't often put alt text in. So screen readers, for example, can't read it. I'll give you a really good example. The Down Syndrome Victoria, their Facebook page. Recently, they've changed it, and all their posts have the alt text, which we would normally see in a Word document or a PDF, etc., actually written underneath the image. So the person who's using a screen reader who can't actually get a gist of what the image has got, because they can't see it, for example, there's very, very detailed descriptors that describe that image in a way that the person who has that no vision can actually get a good handle of what that image does, which is really, really important for the context of the reason we use an image is to support the text that goes around it. So yeah, definitely big heads up. They've done a really good job.
And there are some people doing some great stuff on social media. Be aware that if you're using social media, there is a facility on all of those platforms to add text in the background for all your images. You just need to find it. Some of them are not as straightforward as others. Make sure your videos are captioned if you're posting things, and there's free tools for doing that. And also one last thing, when it comes to hashtags, we've learned that when you hashtag words that are joined together, for instance, if I wanted to hashtag accessible design, if a screen reader reads that, it will read those two words joined together if there's no space in between. So if it's all lowercase, it might read it as accessibilism or something strange. But if you capitalize the beginning letter of every word, even when the words are joined together, it'll read it properly. So if I was going to do accessible design, I'd go hashtag capital A, accessible, capital D, design, and it would read properly.
And even for the sighted user, it just makes them easier to read anyway. Yeah,
that's true. Does the same thing, doesn't it? And lucky last, e-learning. Choose your authoring tool wisely. They're not all equal. But if an authoring tool is telling you that it's great, it's an accessible platform, it probably is. But be careful that the designer who adds stuff into it can easily make it inaccessible in one action. So if you're using authoring tools, make sure that you understand how to make your designs accessible as you use them. And if you're using an external developer, make sure they're meeting the WCAG requirements. And as with always, use human testing, make sure humans are giving you feedback. And when it comes to e-learning, if you've got them in a learning management system, then you've got the capability of asking people to provide ongoing feedback. So if something fails all of a sudden, it's really important that you've got that facility to be able to get feedback straight away. So here are those resources I promised. I'm going to skim through these because we're nearing the end of our hour and I don't want to go over time, but you'll receive a slide deck with all of these resources and links in them. There's stuff about meetings, about websites. There's some information about e-learning. There's general information, and I'll draw your attention to the very last one on the list, which is definitely not the last in terms of usefulness. And that's the one from the South Australian government, who put out a wonderful guide on how to be more accessible in an online world. It's a comprehensive toolkit, all encompassing, so it's worth having a look at. So we've been fairly quiet on the question front, but I'm just wondering if there's any questions now that people might have that they'd like to ask before we finish up. If you don't get to ask them now, feel free to email us. And while we're pondering the questions, just to let you know that if you want more information, we're happy to help you out with that. We do a lot of things in the accessible space. We're very passionate about it, so we're happy to help out and answer questions, but we also offer workshops and masterclasses, and we tailor and customise our things to individuals. So what's going to happen next? By email, you're going to get a request for some feedback. We'd love that feedback, and so would the Geelong City. And also you're going to get a recording of this webinar, and that'll include a transcript, an accessible transcript, and you'll also get a slide deck so that you can use those links and access some of those great resources. In terms of transcripts, we mentioned about captioning before. The captions and the transcripts that will come with the recorded version of the webinar will be accurate. So live captioning is often a little bit inaccurate because it's done on the spot. but the transcript and the captioning afterwards will be corrected.
And thanks for the feedback for the people about your comments on the session. It's really good.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us for Geelong Design Week 2021. So proud to be part of it again. And we thank you for your time and for staying on and listening. And we look forward to your feedback and any questions that you might have. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, see ya. Excellent.